Welcome to Brandon Hall Group's HCMx Radio, the only podcast in the HCM arena that weaves current market research, HR technology, and industry leaders into each episode. Our HCMx Radio host is our Chief Operating Officer and Principal HCM Analyst, Rachel Cook.
Hi, welcome today. I'm Rachel Cook, the host of HCMx Radio podcast and the CEO of Brandon Hall Group. Thank you for joining, and I'd like to warmly welcome two of our guests today. We have with us Erik Peterson and Cadi Halp. Erik is the Director of Learning Excellence and Technology, and a little bit about his background. He has spent his entire career in learning and development, most recently leading the sales learning function for the largest privately owned real estate company in the US. And now Erik leads the Learning and Excellence and Technology function at the leading roofing manufacturer in North America, GAF. In his role, Erik is responsible for ensuring trainings and are accessible and scalable while evaluating organizational impacts of their learning programs. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of these initiatives today, particularly. And also with us, Cadi. Cadi is the Director of Learning and Development, and she has also spent her entire career in learning and development, building and leading high-performing teams at AT&T and Verisk before joining GAF in 2017. Cadi is the Director, as I mentioned, of Learning and Development, where she sets the organizational strategy for their employees, management, and leadership development. So we have two expertise joining us from L&D, and we're going to talk about building an impactful and sustainable learning culture. And to kick us off and get started, Erik, can you share a little bit about the learning culture and how that has evolved at GAF?
Yeah, I like to say GAF is a company that's been around literally since the Statue of Liberty was given to us, right, in 1886. Highly successful, a great history. But I think, it really has only been in the last couple of years that there's been a real focus on talent development and talent management in the organization. So, so the function and the notion of it all is really pretty relatively new, right? So with that comes a lot of, changes in behavior and expectations around it. So, Cadi and I joining the team in the last couple of years have really been tasked with, a shift in the way the company views learning and development, the way we engage with our employees, the opportunities that we provide them. And it continues to be a work in progress. I think we're, in a good place. I think we're getting a lot of the pieces in place foundationally. And now we're just kind of looking to build off of the momentum and that foundation to get us to the next level.
That's fantastic. Cadi, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I just echo what Erik says. I think recently, I've been with GAF for the last 4 years, and specifically in the last 2 to 3 years, just a real emphasis in acknowledging what learning and a learning culture brings to the organization, as well as a focus of aligning that learning to talent strategy, which is why we sit under the talent strategy organization.
And I really love you shared some examples of that, that talent strategy and how learning impacts all phases in your talent life cycle. Can you expand on that and what that looks like?
Yeah, from the standpoint of where we sit, right, we're responsible for culture, we're responsible for performance, developing succession planning, everything that goes along with the talent lifestyle. And they really do go hand in hand, right? I think our moment and our opportunity is, to help people understand that, in order to grow your career, in order to be better in the role that you're currently in or the role that you aspire to, learning and development is central to all of that. So, that's really our mission, is to, not only provide the resources that people can get to grow themselves, but, tell the story of what is here for everybody and what's accessible. Sorry for the bark.
Yeah, no, the structure of the team is focused on professional development. So really what is in general available to every employee, and what types of learning can they engage in formally and informally, as well as then a focus on manager development. And then lastly, a focus on leadership development really indicates that regardless of where you are in the talent life cycle, whether you're a new hire or progressing your career through these levels in the organization, that learning and a continuous learning throughout is really structured in that way. And we focus our offerings and opportunities for employees under those three key umbrellas.
And
Yeah.
I think that that's kind of some of the secret to your success is having them integrated. So you've spent a considerable time making sure that there is a connection between all of it. And can you go a little bit or give us some examples of some of the success stories? Not to mention that you've also received awards from Brandon Hall Group. So congratulations, and I'm sure our listeners would like to learn about some of those success stories.
Yeah. Katie, you want to take this one?
You can jump in. You want to jump in on the manager development piece?
Well, yeah, I think part of it, right? I think our acknowledgement that learning has to happen, not just as an event, right? It's important to, put together experiences for learners and to provide them with, whether it's bite-sized learning or whether it's, broader programs that, those things are all impactful and effective, but it doesn't really matter if it's not being reinforced on the job. And that's really one of our goals, is to not only have things in place for people to develop the skills that they want or they need, but to make sure that their leaders are equipped to carry on, the work, right? By everything from notifying them that their people are involved in a program, so that they can follow up and ask questions and see what's being applied, in their day-to-day life, all the way to managers specifically, and all the way up to our leaders in the organization, that these things are just being reinforced, and that the appropriate skills are in place for these leaders to have the conversations about what they're learning, how to apply it, and even going back to your question about the entire talent life cycle, we need to equip our managers especially to be welcoming of career conversations, and to have the tough dialogue about what somebody potentially could be doing better in their role in order to just, be a better performer or to grow to the place where they want to grow. And I think we're getting there. I think there's an acknowledgement that these are, very important skills. We've got people within, both our leadership and our manager development program specifically, who have really taken to this message and have grown, we'd say tangibly as leaders, and we have some evidence of that we can get into. But that's critical for us, really, is to make sure that, this is just not a one and done event. We don't just count participation. We don't just take surveys and say that we're doing a good job, that we're really embedding a foundation that people are learning and continuing to follow up on the learning as they go. So we're continuing to reinvent that as well.
And how are you measuring that piece?
Yeah. So some of it is around correlation, right? Which we know when you're trying to correlate certain aspects, you can't definitively say that, the training may have had an impact on something else. But for instance, right, we're tracking folks with mobility within the organization, right? In the last 12 months, how engaged are these learners, and is there a connection between people who have mobility in the organization and, the fact that they've taken, large amounts of trainings, or that they've gone through one of our signature, more involved programs, right? We think that's very telling in a lot of senses. And the same goes with retention, right? If we take a look at all of the folks that have termed in our organization, whether voluntary or involuntary, we try to look at their level of engagement and learning too, so that we can tell a story that so far has come to be true, right? Again, whether it's, a result of the training or not, we can go back and say, a trained individual is actually more likely to, be promoted or take on a new role in the company, more likely to be on one of our executive projects or an agility project. And those who are, not staying around with us are more likely to exit the organization, or at least, the rate of which is very noticeably different. So, that speaks to a lot of things as well. That to me, one of the gaps we need to address is the employee experience when they first join the organization. If I can kind of go back to a point very early in the conversation, when you're trying to build a learning function, a lot of times you're trying to catch up and meet people where they're at. And I think we're doing a good job of, upskilling people who maybe haven't gone through an experience like this in a 15, 20, 30-year career at GAF. But, ultimately the place we want to get to is when you join the organization, we really want you to, be embedded in the culture. We want to be able to roll out these programs early on so that people can, again, just level set the values and the skills and the culture pieces that we want to embed with them early so that we have a consistent set of behaviors across, all of our functions. So I'd say correlation is one area. And if I could just tack on, another, because as we talk about getting, really deeper into, measurable impact on the job, I think we're seeing that in our manager development program. This is one of the programs that we won the Brandon Hall Award for Best Blended Learning Program. And what we're trying to do with that is, give managers an experience where we're putting them through a set of universal skills identified by GAF leadership that we want all GAF managers to possess. And then on the flip side, we want to provide them with opportunities to develop individually. So we give them a 360. We talk to them, in depth about the results of that 360 and kind of ask them to commit to areas where they would like to focus. So, in the follow-up to that, a couple of things we've done and are doing is we'll follow up with 360s, 90 days after the end of the program to see if there's notable behavior from everybody within a person's orbit, right? And that has told us, right, that there is improvement and we're continuing to get more positive metrics on that. But for me, we're also interviewing the managers of the managers within this program. And not only are they telling us, yes, I noticed a difference, I noticed a change in my person. Like anybody could say that, right? But when we ask specifically, what are you seeing? The specific skills that they cite are very, very, very closely aligned to the curriculum that we are teaching. And to me, that tells me, they're just not pulling it out of thin air and they're like, yeah, they're a better manager now. They're people who like them more. It's like, no, they're a better delegator. They're a better, collaborator. They're a better at conflict resolution. So we've got a lot of evidence to the extent that 89% is our most recent, finding that 89% of managers have found those kinds of tangible results in the program. So to me, that tells us it's working.
That's great. And you talk a lot about upskilling, and we've been having a lot of conversations about upskilling lately. And, I think it's kind of the buzz or kind of the result of having to, I think, switch a lot of people this past year into different roles because of, what was needed in this new environment. So it'll be interesting, how we kind of move forward. We've been talking a lot about what the trends are, what's going to last, what's going to, be sustainable. So, I think a lot of what we're doing now is going to be sustainable, maybe with a few nuances here or there. But I think a lot of what you're doing and other organizations, there's, trying to be scalable and trying to transform, their old ways of doing things where they kind of knew that they needed to, but the pandemic kind of just pushed them into that, full-fledged. So, talk a little bit about your transformation and, kind of with all these competing priorities now, right? How are you making decisions or what's guiding your process for this?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, in terms, Rachel, are you asking specifically about the way our team is going through the transformation, or do you mean the business in general?
Maybe start with the business and then kind of, kind of dovetail into, how your team is also, handling it.
Yeah. So I would say, our approach there's so much change happening in GAF, pandemic related and non-pandemic related. And I think it's taking a really honest approach to people and capabilities that will deliver the results that the organization is looking for. It's not just general learning and training that people are looking for, just basic skills. It's, what specifically do we need in digital transformation, and looking from a people perspective of how are we today? What does our culture look like today? How are people behaving and performing today? And how do we need to shift that for tomorrow? I think that's a big piece in how we've been approaching change and transformation. It's not just the processes and the step-by-step, but it's really an intentional focus on people and behaviors, and mindsets, right? And I think a learning culture in general, right, which is the overall topic that we're discussing today, it really helps people to understand that learning is a journey. And if we do have a culture of learning, that as you move through upskilling and changes to business structure, changes to the way that people are working, it naturally comes a little bit easier if you acknowledge that you're learning constantly, right? And I think that trying to reinforce that with our business leaders. And, we've got lots of support even from our business transformation team and agility team of coaches that work through with our leaders and say, where is it that you need folks to go? Where are they today? And how do we help them get there? And then partnering with us on the talent team. I think is key to what we've been doing in terms of the transformation in the business. For us specifically within our team, I think it's continuously looking to the future, right? Being ahead of the business, not necessarily just a reactionary, right? Our people need to learn this. Instead, we're proactively aligning to the strategy, having a more visible seat at the table at strategic conversations, and really aligning our learning and our learning programs with business leaders at the front end, instead of catching up and saying, oh yeah, I guess we need to think about, do we have the right skills and capabilities? It's proactively aligning to that up front is really a shift our team continues to make and strive for.
And your point and how you're collecting that measurement and the success of what you're working on, the way that you're going about it and you're looking at the correlations, I think that makes a much stronger message to your business leaders about how you're, how this impacts them and the organization, rather than just saying, okay, we had everyone complete this class, or at least, 90% did, but then that's it. And, we still see a lot of programs that are being measured that way, or, we hear a lot of concerns about some of the newer modalities, and how do you measure it? The informal learning, which is a big push into learning in itself nowadays. So I think, having that full piece and, making sure that the learning is connected to the business, that's connected to the employee life cycle, the way that you're approaching it, you're going to be positioned a lot stronger in the future.
Yeah, and I think our push to, like I said, if we think we're coming in midstream to upskill in a lot of areas, there was a lot of truth to that, right? But the challenge of even just for each business's particular needs on a particular topic, right? If we're not there to establish the baseline and understand up front, what we're trying to achieve and what great looks like, as Cadi often says, and what KPIs we're trying to measure, then we're really behind already. So the goal to get up in front of these initiatives and kind of be there at the beginning, instead of what happens often in my training career, training gets brought in, when they're ready to do the training for something, and you have to change some of that. And I think one of the other pieces about really moving to a true learning culture, although I do agree that a participant metric does not really, it does not or should not tell the full story, but there is a little truth to, for us, we know there are employees that are hungry for development, and a lot of feedback that we get is that there's a lot of demands on their job and I don't have the time for learning. So, if our push is to get leadership to, to bless the idea of taking some time out of your week or your month to, just take some courses, again, whether that's a 20-minute online piece, a 4-minute video, a 2-day seminar, it's okay to develop ourselves if we're going to grow. and that, this notion that I say often is, learning is not a luxury item, right? This is not something that we should just do when it feels convenient. It should be a priority in the organization because of the push for innovation that we've got. So, that's of paramount importance if we're going to develop a learning culture there.
Yeah, that's a good point to make. And I think having a learning culture and the buy-in or the emphasis on how important it is, and it's supported by your leaders, it will then, as the individual or the team, they feel I see more valued in the companies that do have, a true learning culture that is communicated and embedded in, all that they do, rather than, just a very high performing culture that eventually that's not sustainable. Turn out a lot of, great people. You might be performing at a very high level, which is important. However, it just has to, it has to fit all together for it to be successful.
That's the right skills and competencies are changing, right? It's so important to continue to develop those things, because you'll be in trouble if you go too long without sharpening the saw.
Sure, absolutely. Well, this is a great conversation. Cadi, Erik, are there any considerations? We talked a lot about priorities and what you've been doing. What's next for you for the remaining part of this year, or looking into next year, into 2022, if you can believe it or not?
It'll be here before we know it, right?
Yeah.
I think from my perspective, in the overall strategy is just really clear alignment between the offerings, right? So there is a clear thread that comes through regardless of where you are in the talent life cycle, that there's learning that is connected, there is learning connected to progression, and there is learning that is both informal and formal. There's clear value in formal learning, but what are some of those opportunities that we can build in 2022 that build upon the success of programs, but then are where our employees are, instead of intentionally pulling them away from work. I think that's a big piece for us. And I think Erik, in terms of from a technology perspective and making it scalable, probably has things that align closely with that. So am I right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. So on the other side of it, right? We mentioned before, well, we've been talking about the importance of, making the learning sticky, right? And making sure that it's got impact on the business. So, using technology to bring, we're bringing in an AI tool to assist people with reinforcing the skills that we're teaching. So we're not going to rely on this platform to teach people, things from scratch necessarily, but we want to put them through an experience that's relevant to them, and then send them to, a platform which is, a conversation driven by an avatar using, features of AI that, really make sure that it reinforces the skills that we're trying to teach, so that, again, we'll have metrics on the back end that will say, okay, 6 months ago, you went through a 2-day coaching piece, right? We're big on Grow coaching. You went through 2 days of the Grow coaching model. How did you apply it 6 months later? Are you still using the principles? What, where are the areas where collectively the group is strongest? Where can the individual grow? So, using things like that, and then just kind of helping, again, with scalability, learning measurement is really labor intensive, right? If you're really trying to, and then you have to be disciplined, right? You can't take 20 reports and splice them together. Sometimes there's no end to it, which is half fun and half maddening, right? But we're looking for, assistance to kind of help us, have more automated follow-ups with our learners, make sure that, they are applying things to the work, that they are getting light touches, whether it be a text message or an email with, 3 questions or a reinforcement video, to just kind of make sure what they learn stays with them and that they're reminded to apply it, and then hope that, that data comes back so we can really tell true ROI, right? So that we can actually tell the business that, as a result of these behaviors being enhanced and increased, you're seeing, an X amount increase in productivity or sales or, customer service scores, things like that. That's next for us on that end of it.
That's great. Well, you certainly have a lot of priorities going on and a really good approach to how you're handling it. Thank you for sharing. I feel that hopefully our listeners today walk away with a couple of considerations for, for what they're doing, or at least be inspired by you both in your organization. So it's been a great conversation. Thank you for sharing. And it's a wrap for today. Until next time, thank you everyone for listening in, and take care.
Thank you for having us, Rachel.
Thanks for having us.
It was a pleasure.